Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Uh, I don't know what you said last time, but something actually got through to me as far as uh, the my attitude when I'm sitting, when I'm or towards what my practice, and I I was really fired up like after we got through with our call because you just had me so jazzed about it. I was just like I'm gonna do this, and I sat down, and I don't know if it was 2 days later, but or one day, but I really started to cultivate that uh, I don't even know, just the gladdening the mind, but I started looking at it in a different way as uh, just giving myself it's like your mind has so much energy to really be in the present moment, and I was really cultivating that energy in a new way, and in the noting and like being right there in the present moment and really being sharp and paying attention to when I was falling back into ruminating or and so I and and I had that energy I felt like and the confidence that I can do it, and
Hmm.
I started noting throughout my day at work, just keeping it going, just left right, when I'm walking, and pull push, just really noting what I'm doing throughout the day, and that really gave me confidence, like, you know and then you see how much you stay in this ruminating, and you just fall back into this crappy ruminations, and it's just this you don't want to be there, and you keep and you
So you're
see
beginning to see the dukkha of the wandering mind. Exactly, exactly.
and you can be in the moment, and it's a much better place to be, you know and you got this asshole trying to drag you down when you can just be right here, left, right. That's that's better. Thinking about putting your left foot in front of your right foot is better than half the stuff I think about, or anything really. It's being right there, and I was like, I can do this, and man, I sat down for a sit, and right the last 5 minutes, I just I couldn't. I had that image of that yurt. You were talking about the yurt, the
Yes.
where you're building it into a peak, and I
Hmm.
kept how much energy I needed to push my mind into that peak and to keep it from falling back into the past or falling forward into the future. And I was like pushing it to that peak, and how much energy that took. And then
Yes.
it overtook me. The energy just overtook, and I just started laughing uncontrollably, just hysterical, like I had never laughing and crying, and I was wringing my hands. There was just so much. It was just complete freedom is what it felt like.
The
And
touch of the Dhamma.
yeah, yeah. And I was just like, I didn't want it to end, but um, and I've been keeping it going. I had another energetic experience, not like that, but I was wringing my hands. I felt that energy, but we had family here for the weekend, and it's it was almost impossible to practice while they were here. So that kind
Except to just laugh at any and everything anybody says.
of yeah, it was a much more joyful time than I usually have with this particular family. So, you know, but I I'm just thinking, what next? I don't want to like try to. I feel like I'm trying to recreate that moment, or I'm waiting for it as it should happen again, or something like that when I'm practicing now.
All
Um,
right. Yes, that's a very, very important trap to avoid.
mm,
All right. That, um, let us say, whatever first experience a person has, that first experience was due to a set of circumstances that were created, the cause that caused that effect. And it was possibly multiple factors of complexity. But one of the factors that was not there that first time was knowledge of what the effect was. So the second time you do it, now you're adding an additional factor, and that's going to prevent it from happening again. The expectation, literally wanting something we don't have, is suffering.
mm,
All right.
yeah.
So the point is then is to go to one peak moment like that to another peak moment that's not like that. The next one will be different. And eventually you begin to see a pattern set up about what these high points are. But if you try to recreate the high point that you had last time, you won't get it or anything else.
Yeah.
All right. But you do recognize that there's a quality of energy in this, that it
Mm,
actually keeps us alive. All right. This is life itself that we're capable of doing, where everything. Um, there was a point in time in every child's life before they get cynical. This is the would be the stage of early phallic, age of 3 years old, where everything. This is the time, by the way, when the kids are really in there playing with their toys. This is the toy playing stage, all right, where
mm.
everything is amazing to them, and they're running all over the place. They call
I've
them
got one of
toddlers.
those.
Huh? Yes,
I've got one of
okay.
those.
All right. You need to recapture that for yourself because it has been squashed and repressed by the parents, just like you're squashing and repressing that in your own child.
Yeah.
But there is an energetic quality to it, and that has to do with freedom,
Mm, mm-hmm,
that we feel
mm-hmm.
free and light. And
Light.
that light, yes, the light quality, bouncing even, almost as if all of a sudden now we don't live on planet Earth with its heavy gravity, we live on the moon. Or every step is kind of like a pogo stick. So
Mm,
there's in fact, and even in the English language, they have the phrases about it like having a bounce in your step.
yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back and review what needs to be done to get one into that state. Because the Buddha's got it very, very well laid out in the Anapanasati Sutta. It's just not laid out in the order of occurrence. Rather, it's laid out in the order of structure. And because of that, people get confused. They think that they have to follow the structure rather than understanding, no, the structure is kind of like the boundary, and anywhere you go within this set of boundaries is great. But if you go outside this boundary, then you're out there in dukkha land. Okay, so
Mm,
that's another way of looking at it. So these are boundaries rather than steps that people walk through. And another way of saying it is that and this is actually a statement that's translated out of the Pali as one by one as they occur. They also talk about it as adventitious defilements, in the sense that the defilements will arise whenever they can find a crack or an advantage or a way to come up. They will come up like that. And so that's also the kind of, let us say, at least pseudo-random. If I'm going to be a computer scientist, I got to put that in the world. Pseudo-random is not actually random.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for it is because of the number of causes that are associated with it can be limited, and that makes it a false randomness. In other words, things become predictable.
Okay.
But within that boundary, there's only so much little things that we're going to be watching for in the mind.
Okay.
And so let's go through that sequence of events, okay? The new meditator sits down with the idea, with the understanding, with the right view that he's going to watch the breath. Basically, that's all he's got in mind. You've got a little bit more in mind. You're beginning to pile on that right view. You got
Mm-hmm.
some other things in there. So then when the mind wanders away from the breath, we need that sati, that wake up, to remember. Now, here's the thing about sati that a lot of people don't quite understand. And that is that if we had sati on a regular basis all throughout our lives would be completely different than they are now. That basically our lives are a set of wrong turns. And we got up
Mm-hmm.
where we were through a series of tens of thousands of wrong turns that were done unwisely. And if you had been living your life wisely all of this time, you would have wound up completely different. You may not even speak the same language that you're speaking now. So, in that regard, sati is so important. It's so valuable, and it's a skill that we should be developing. Because what that skill is basically it's to wake up, the wakey. It's the nudge. We can call it a trigger. We can call it an anchor. In NLP, they talk about it as being an anchor in the sense that the breath is an anchor, that we always want to come back to that point, come back to the anchorage or back to the port. The breath is like that. We want to keep coming back to it and back to it and back to the breath. Now, you also mentioned that you felt really, really energized, that there was a lot of energy. One of the places, in fact, most important quality of energy within the body is to being able to get enough breath.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't
Yeah.
believe me, go walk up a hill.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it takes effort, it takes energy, and that energy then, even though we've got stored up fuel in the body from the last few meals that we've eaten, plus some old stuff that's stored there as the fuel to burn, a fire, regardless of whether it's an electrochemical fire like happens in the body, or it's a fire that's down in the woods, or it's Exxon Mobil burning down, whatever it is going to take the three combinations of um, the kindling temperature, the fuel, and the oxygen. Without the oxygen, and this is in fact everything that the firefighters know about. Try to get the kindling temperature down by putting water on it. They try to put a foam on it to get the oxygen away. To use CO2 to get the oxygen away. Or maybe to put a fire break to separate it from its next new fuel. These are all of the things that firefighters do. So if we know that that's true within that big world, we can also see that that's true within our own mind. And this is extremely important about needing to get that breath. That's why anapanasati, the first step of it, is that long, deep breath. It's so important. And so that's one of the most important qualities then, is to remember to take a deep breath.
Mm. Yep. Yep.
To take a deep breath.
When it happened, I was breathing heavily, and then I didn't even realize it, how deeply I was breathing. You know, I was just, it was just happening because I was staying so close to the rising falling, because I wasn't going back or forward. I was in the rising falling, not much else going on, and so it just got more and more intense until, you know, can't it like like an orgasm, you know. I mean, it's that kind of thing where you're building up, and then it's like, whoa.
Okay. Here's another way of saying it.
Yeah.
Is that if you're putting water in a bucket
Uh-huh.
and the water flow, you still got the tap on and the water is still coming into the bucket, what's going to happen to that bucket?
Overflow. Yeah.
That's the better word to use. It's an overflow.
Ah.
All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
eventually want to look at that overflow in the sense of the joy that you have is going to overflow to others.
Yeah. Okay.
And after that, your Dhamma, when you're completely
Mm-hmm.
full of Dhamma, when you're really full of it, it overflows.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when you're angry, you get full of it, and then you overflow with anger. All right, so
Mm-hmm.
this overflowing quality is part of it, and it's based a lot on being able to breathe well, because we're actually breathing well and then sitting there. That's all of this oxygen to put to work. And by the way, guess what? One thing takes more oxygen, more fuel, more blood flow than any other organ in the body.
What?
It's the brain.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's the frontal part of the brain, the frontal cortex.
Yeah.
The back of the brain actually is um, normally reserved for emergency mode. Okay, it's like in many different cases, you would want a backup plan. Well, the human being has that backup plan, and the backup plan is the reptilian brain. That which got us here and kept us alive doesn't need near, is much more efficient, doesn't need near the amount of oxygen that the frontal cortex does. But the frontal cortex is, for the human, is more like a supercomputer, and the anterior cortex is more like a laptop. It even runs on batteries.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
Solar
if we
powered
get
calculator.
so that frontal cortex needs that energy. It needs that effort, and the more energy it has, the better. So if students would debate while they're listening to their debate um, opponent, instead of listening to what he has to say and don't liking what he has to say and being afraid that you don't have good answers for what he has to say, that shuts the student down and they go into kind of a survival mode. But if that
Mm-hmm.
student is energetic and he's laughing at what the other opponent is saying
Mm-hmm.
and taking deep breaths and being very much alive, then when he gets on in front of the podium, he's going to have a completely different address to give. While his opponent now is sitting over there being downhearted and dejected because you're up there on top of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. What's that? Okay. One sec. I'll be right back with you.
Okay.
Okay. We're back.
So we were talking about anapanasati going through the various stages. Now, that point in time when we wake up, one of the important things is that we do actually, at that point in time, experience the mind. But eventually we're going to get pretty good at experiencing the mind because we're going to, through sati, be awake to it in the sense of knowing when it's dull, when it's sharp, when it's exalted, as that point, or when it is prone to be into hindrances or prone to be free from hindrances. So we begin to notice the mind and the mind states. These would be states of mind, and that is really, really worthy of investigation to keep track of what state of mind that you're in. This is step 9 of anapanasati. And I know that anapanasati is really, it's more like a smorgasbord. But everybody, when they see anapanasati, it says, "Well, this plate is too full. I couldn't possibly eat all of this." So step 9 is that point when we start. That's sati. That's the wake up. And the first thing that we do is that we do not allow the mind to stay in the state of mind that it was when that wake up call came. We're going to change it now. That's what sati, all the wake up is to change your level of awareness, to wake up, to go move from one step to the next. All right. And so this wake up call then is going to, first off, is going to say, step 10 anapanasati, I caught you. Not only was the mind in its normal old state, but I can see that it was in its normal old state. And that's a miracle. Sati is actually a miracle, to wake up to recognize what states of mind and what contents of the mind there is. And by doing so, that begins to give you confidence. The gladdening of the mind is actually the building of the confidence that eventually says, I can do this. This is possible. The very highest thing that humanity is capable of is normally referred to as in the teaching of the Buddha. You see, within Christianity, the highest things of Christianity would be sainthood, but the sainthoods that they're talking about is acting all holy and everything. To where here we're talking about perhaps like being a statesman or a noble, a very, very high class, high quality human being that does not have any conflicts of interest because his interests are all unified into samadhi. And he's happy and generous and wealthy. He's at the top of humanity. And this is what Buddha teaches. This is the teaching of the Buddha. The enlightenment is not magic. It is something that a human being can do, and it has been done throughout history. And the Buddha merely recognized that, and he gave a very big tip of the hat in the direction that this is an old path, that he did not discover something brand new, that he discovered something that was old, well established, a well trodden path of humanity to this highest point, which we would call samadhi. So that is what you're training for, is you're going to be taking yourself to the very highest quality that humanity has to offer. That should give you a yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay kind of experience. That's a wow. We're talking about the very, very best there is of humanity. This is not the promise of some heaven or something, or some gift that somebody's going to give you, or even something that you earned because of your good behavior in the past. Rather, this is a skill that you have developed through the practice of the Buddha, and that you know that you deserve this because you've gone through the practice. This is the high quality that we're looking for, because if you think about it like that, most of the people in the world are looking for a win. And this is the best win there can possibly be. Therefore, we deserve to feel the very best of how good a human being can feel. And all we have to do is develop that.
Yeah.
And we know we can. And in fact, the knowledge that we can do it is the energy or the effort that it takes to get us going to go do that.
Yes.
Yes, this is okay. So now I've been stepping through the stages of Vedana, mostly step 6. You see, when we gladden the mind and gladden it properly, it brings on this feeling of, and it's a feeling of utter success.
Mm-hmm.
Champion of the world. This is better than 15 gold medals in the same year. Nobody's ever done that. I think one guy did 4 or 5 or something. World champions rarely break the 4-minute mile. This is the 3-minute mile. Einstein, if you look at him in his old age, including some of the photographs and other things, you recognize that he was actually smart enough with his physics during the 1900s, 19 up to 1910, that period of time, and then all of the arguments that he had with Oppenheimer and Boyles and all of that during the 1920s, and then all of the 30s and the escape from Germany and everything that happened. But when you look at him in his 50s as an old man, one of the qualities that really stands out is that he was happy.
Yeah.
He figured out how to do it.
Right.
And I think that his music, because he was a violinist, quite good. I think that his music was a major part of that. That it gave him the real satisfaction.
You think
But now
it
this,
was the contemplation played a part in it too, all the time he spent,
well, can you recognize what a focus? He's really in
Right.
on it. Well, if he
Yeah.
can do that with time and space on
Mm-hmm.
the outside, he can do that on time and space on the inside too.
Mm-hmm.
We can figure out how to be happy. We've got the tools to do that. The Buddha was not the only one, but the Buddha did point to this thing that you can do also. And that should give you enormous satisfaction.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Winning by just feeling like a winner. I don't know.
Not only feeling
Yeah.
like a winner, but feeling like you've won the very best prize there is, freedom.
Freedom. Yeah. That's how it felt. And it gave me an incentive to keep it going
Right.
and
That
wanting
that
to,
incentive.
yeah,
Go ahead.
and I don't I what I've been trying to think about lately is the interplay between the noting and the gladdening of the mind, and whereas the gladdening of the mind feels almost physical, or you know it's there's energy, and there's a lot to it, and then the noting helps keep me in the present moment. It helps remind me, and so I'm it seems it's like which one is more important here, but I um I don't know. It's um and trying to figure out new ways to gladden the mind, or something else, some sort of different practice,
All right.
or that's
In
for
that
saying.
regard, you can begin to note how good you feel.
Hmm. Okay.
Begin to note the satisfaction. Begin to note the success. And
That's
that when you're on guard, to note that you're on guard.
and that's that as soon as it was over, I said, "Oh, I didn't note it." You know, I, I didn't pay attention to it. It happened, and then it was like I viewed it as this experience, but I wish I would have paid attention. I wish I could have been in the moment with the pity, or whatever. You
Never
know.
mind. Start again.
Okay.
If you
All
keep
right.
playing the piano, you'll eventually hit that new note too.
Okay.
Again.
Yeah, it took a turn, and started really feeling like a skill. Like I knew what I was doing. I had a sense of knowing, all right, I'm not just sitting on this pillow. I'm doing something here, and I'm concentrated on it, and I'm getting better at it, and I can do it. It it really solidified that part of it. And so now it's easier when I sit down, because I know I know what I'm do- I in some sense I know what I'm doing, and so I have confidence that, because there's so much doubt in your mind, and you could think, well, what am I doing sitting here wasting my time? But now I know that I know what I'm doing. Right.
All right.
Well, I,
And in fact, that very thought that so many students, why am I sitting here wasting my time? They don't note that that's a hindrance.
mm,
And that's the kind of thoughts that they've had 10,000 times in the past. They just get themselves into the situations, and then they start into victim. Why me? Why do I have to be here? What is this all about, Alfie? That
right.
kind of state of mind. And they start playing it with meditation too. So the whole point is wake up to that. See that stuff. And this is why we have the breath as that anchor to help us, because basically when we're sitting in meditation, the only thing that's happening is breathing. And so the breathing should be then help the reminder to bring that sati on to wake us up,
Hmm.
because we're normally in that state of, why me, daddy? Why do you blame me?
Mm,
I'm not the boss here. That's the victim's position. And we get into
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
the thought that you just had was the thought of the victim. So we have to be on guard for those victim thoughts, so that anytime that they come up, we can say, we're not going to crawl on that victim's wagon and get carried off to hell. We're just not going to get on it. Get out of here.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I thought about the the I heard it described as like, you want to be paying so close attention when you're noting, like a cat looking at a mouse hole, right? But with
Mm-hmm.
this with this gladdening the mind, you feel like a lion waiting on a gazelle.
Yeah.
There's a confidence, there's a difference to it, and that really changed my attitude, for sure.
Yeah, the analogy of the cat with the mouse hole misses something, because that's almost like samadhi. Then is the concentration on down onto the mouse hole without keeping track of the whole rest of the room, which the mouse might have more than one hole, and he's out there. In fact, he's nibbling on the toes of the cat because he got around to the back. All right,
Yeah.
but your analogy of the lion with the gazelle is right, because that lion's going to know everything.
Yeah.
He's going to
Yeah.
sit there and he's going to listen, and he's going to make sure that he's really on top of the whole show, as if the cat there was not just watching the mouse hole. He's watching for any signs of mouseness anywhere, and he is
Right.
up on it. Okay. This takes a kind of an energy, but the analogy or the story about the Zen stick is extraordinarily excellent for this. That's one of the things that I really like about the Zen system is that they just cut right to the chase. Where I have to, on the internet, I have to describe all of this stuff. So here you got the Zen master with this cane. It's just a regular piece of cane, but it's slit down to a point where there's a hole that's been drilled, and then they shave out some of it so that when the Zen stick hits, it doesn't have to hit hard to make a loud noise. That's the whole point of having that slit in it. And he's walking around the dojo looking at every student and every student's body posture and every student's change of body posture. And he expects them, when he comes close behind them to their slight change of body posture, that is actually a signal that the student gives himself. I know the teacher is behind me. But by doing that, you look at me, I'm beginning to straighten up just a little bit more and more. The teacher's here. Here's my shoulder, dude. But the student who is down like this and is not paying attention to the fact that the Zen master is in the room, he's the one that gets whacked.
Mm.
He's not paying attention to the here now. He's the cat that's focused on the mouse hole. He's not the lion with the gazelles.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The lion with
Yeah.
gazelle knows that the Zen master is there in a room in the dojo, and he's going to be alert and awake for it. In that regard, being here now means being in our senses, be in our eyes. Now, there's two ways of looking with our eyes. One is, again, focused on something, like look at one little particular thing, like a person coming off from the distance. And then the other way of looking is like what they call gazing. And gazing is just not taking any particular object, but just kind of looking around,
Mm-hmm.
having a soft gaze, sort of not looking at anything, but that we understand that the eyes, through the mind's work, will begin to focus and pay attention on things that move. Movement will attract our attention away from a gaze into a focused look. So by taking an object, we focus in, and we want to stay focused out. So in the concept of then perception within the teaching of the Paticca, what we then begin to do is to not take any objects. If we're not taking any objects, then we have nothing to perceive, and if there's nothing to perceive, then there is no bad feelings or any of that stuff. We're just sitting in the senses.
Mm.
And the more we do that, so they kind of very quickly move from the body senses to the eye senses to the hearing senses to the back and forth. And we're just kind of all over the place, kind of all the time. With the one quality is it's always right here, right now. The whole quality of be here now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're developing, which is better than staying in the past. So
Yeah.
in this here now, not only can we experience the green colors and the blue of the sky and the wind, we can also experience what state of mind are we in? How do we feel? So it's so important to understand that this is the name that the Buddha gave himself and referred to himself as the Tathagata, the one who is here now. The bad translation is one who is gone to the now. That makes no sense. Unless the here now is someplace else that he goes to. And for most people, that's actually true.
Gone to the here now. Be right back. Just going to grab some beer.
Yeah, some really good juice. Really good, juicy breath with some nice, magical, good feelings. And a win or two. So this is the practice of anapanasati with these things. In the sense mostly of having wholesome things in the mind and not allowing unwholesome things in the mind. Now, to be able to do that requires a mind that's fit for work. Because a mind that's not fit for work will then allow unwholesome thoughts in. Thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, thoughts about things we want, like enlightenment, or other things we want, like why am I here doing this when I could be out having a beer or something? That actually did come to me one time when I was at Watsuanlo, way back in the back of the woods there. And the thought came, you know, I could go get a job and make a lot of money in the United States because I've done that before. And then it hit me, and it hit me really strong. That was a really, really strong moment. That if I'm bored here at Watsuanlo, it's one reason only. I'm not practicing correctly.
Yeah.
To allow thoughts like that in. I mean, look how much time and effort I've already put into getting away from those jobs in the United States, and here I'm wanting one now. Give me a break!
The mind is tricky, you know.
So, staying out of the past is something that really is. That's excellent. I love that. Let me back up on that. The Buddha says adventitious defilements, that will find ways of coming in, and you just gave it a new label, and I love that. The mind is tricky. It will find ways of coming up. That old stuff will find ways of bubbling up. So we have to learn to find a way of putting a lid on it. And that experiencing that stuff that's coming up like that, that's actually step 5, 6, 7. And then putting the lid on it is step 8. Throwing that stuff out, saying, no, you're not part of this mental world anymore. The old stuff, the old sandcars can literally stay in the sewer. And this time we have the manhole cover in place.
I had to sit today, and after my wife's family left, and I was very grateful for the silence, and I was very grateful just to be sitting, just to be able to sit, and there was no trouble with it. But having them here made me realize, you know, how grateful I was for the practice and to be practicing, because they you know, there's no time for silence with them. You know.
And I bet you would go so far as to say that each one of them is rushing from one emergency to the next.
Yeah. in a very exaggerated, extreme way. Yes, yeah, almost to the point of, of mental issues. You know.
Well, those are mental issues. I don't know of
Yeah,
anyone who doesn't have any mental issues.
I don't either.
You could call it mental illness or mental disease. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa makes a distinction with that in the sense that he uses the word mental illness only in the sense of brain damage or a chemical abnormality, such as schizophrenia or things like that. That otherwise we will call it a spiritual disease.
Mm-hmm.
And then he laughs and calls it a mental disease anyway. We're all mentally ill.
It's true.
And we're ill in the sense that we don't feel good.
Yeah.
We feel ill, actually. And what is the ill way that we feel most of the time? We feel victim. We feel victimized. We feel put upon. All of those people who are in that emergency mode, running from one fire to the next, really resent having to do that. That
Yeah.
they're as firefighters, they're victims of some arsonist, and they know not who it is.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in that regard, it's a very, very interesting show. You know, Shakespeare
Mm-hmm.
said that all the world's a stage and everyone is an actor. What Shakespeare failed to recognize is, oh no, some of us know how to get off stage and go sit in the audience and watch the show. And then about the only thing we can do is eat popcorn and have cat calls.